What if the most dangerous moment in your financial life is not when you are broke, but the moment you finally feel safe? Think about that for a second, because that is exactly when most people stop watching. The pressure drops. The income looks stable. The savings account has real numbers in it. And that is the moment the trap comes back. Not with a crisis, not with a dramatic collapse. It comes back quietly, through comfort, through upgrades that feel completely deserved. One new subscription, a better apartment, a car payment you can easily handle now. And then one day, without any single big mistake, your freedom starts depending on your paycheck again. That is what this video is about. This is video 3 in a series built around one uncomfortable truth. Most people who escape the salary trap eventually walk back into it. Not because they are reckless, not because they stop caring, because the system does not need your ignorance. It only needs your autopilot. In video 1, we saw how the salary trap works. How money fragments before you even feel it leaving. How lifestyle inflation silently absorbs every raise. In video 2, we went inside the psychology of people who start to step away. The identity crisis, the social pressure, the fear that freedom might actually be a mistake. But here is what neither of those videos answered. What do you do after you get out? How do you stay out when the system keeps offering better-looking cages? That is the question this video answers. And I want to be direct with you from the start. This is not motivational content. There are no promises of passive income by Friday. No shortcuts dressed up as strategies. What you are going to see is the actual pattern that pulls free people back into dependence, and the specific structure that keeps that from happening. Before we go deeper, here is something I want you to do. Grab your phone or open a spreadsheet. Write down your total recurring monthly costs. Not a rough estimate, the actual number. Because that number is going to mean something very different by the time this video ends. Now, back to the question. If you already reduced your dependence, if you already built some breathing room, why would freedom ever start shrinking again? Here is the answer most financial channels never give you. Freedom is not a destination. It is a practice. And if you stop practicing it, the system quietly resumes its original programming. Higher comfort, higher costs, higher dependence, all dressed up as progress. That is the pattern we are going to expose today, step by step, with real examples, real decisions, and a real plan you can use immediately. But first, you need to see how the return actually begins. And it starts in a way almost nobody catches early enough. Because what looks like growth is often just the trap wearing better clothes. A dream a year ago, Marcus thought he had done it. He stepped off the treadmill, reduced his costs, built a serious cash reserve, and replaced financial panic with something that felt like real breathing room. For the first time in more than a decade, money was not chasing him through every morning. And that should have been the end of the story. But it was not, because freedom does not become permanent the moment pressure disappears. That is where the next problem begins. And at first, nothing looked wrong. That is what made it dangerous. Marcus did not wake up one morning and decide to rebuild the old life. He simply started saying yes to things that looked harmless. A better co-working membership, a premium grocery store because he was eating healthier now, more weekends away, delivery meals on busy evenings, software tools for the side business, a smarter phone plan. Nothing irresponsible, nothing dramatic. In fact, if you looked at each decision on its own, you could call it completely rational. That is exactly how the trap returns. Never as a villain, always as a convenience. Now here is where I want you to do something practical. Open your calculator, or write this in your notes. Add up every recurring monthly cost you accepted in the last 12 months. Not annual projections, not theoretical averages, the actual monthly total. Most people never feel that number building. They feel each payment separately. $49 here, $180 there, $200 for convenience, $300 for flexibility. But when you finally stack them together, something uncomfortable appears. The life that once felt light starts getting heavy again. Not because you failed, because your commitments learned how to multiply faster than your awareness. Marcus noticed the first signal on a Thursday afternoon. He was reviewing accounts, not because he was in trouble, because something in his body felt familiar. A low buzz of tension, a quiet tightening in the chest. He looked at the number and paused. His essential expenses were still under control, but his optional expenses were no longer optional in his mind. He had adapted to them. He had started protecting them. That is one of the first signs almost nobody catches early. You stop treating upgrades like choices. You begin treating them like standards. And the moment a standard forms, your freedom becomes responsible for supporting it. Then came the second signal. Marcus was earning from several sources now: consulting, portfolio income, a small digital product that sold every month. On paper, he was more resilient than before. Psychologically, he was becoming less resilient. Why? Because his lifestyle had started assuming all of those streams would continue. He had escaped dependence on one paycheck, but he was slowly creating dependence on a higher baseline. Different structure, same vulnerability. And this is where most people get confused. They think freedom collapses only when income falls. Often, it begins collapsing when comfort rises. That is the reversal almost nobody expects. A woman I once heard describe this said it perfectly. I did not go back to the rat race because I needed more money. I went back because I got tired of managing uncertainty. Listen carefully to that. That is not a money statement. That is an identity statement. Some people do not miss the job. They miss the structure, the status, the clean explanation of who they are and why their life makes sense. And when that feeling returns, strange behavior starts appearing. You become impatient with slower progress. You start browsing things you already decided you did not need. You begin craving visible proof that you are still moving forward. This is where the first warning signs usually sound almost innocent. I just wanted a little more stability. I only upgraded because my time is valuable now. I can afford it, so why not? And maybe you can. That is what makes this harder to detect than debt or obvious overspending. The question is not whether you can afford it today. The question is what that decision will require you to protect tomorrow. Because every fixed comfort creates a future obligation. Every recurring convenience trains your brain to expect continuity. Every image you maintain creates a private standard you feel pressure to defend. Now widen the frame. This is not happening to one person. It is happening to freelancers, former executives, business owners, early retirees, remote workers, and high earners who once believed they had broken the pattern for good. The scale is bigger than most people realize. The system does not only pull in the struggling, it pulls in the successful, especially when success teaches them to trust every increase in comfort. That is why the return often looks polished from the outside. So if you feel a little unsettled right now, good. That means you can still catch it early. But here is the real question. Which of these signs is already active in your life? Is it the new expense you justified in under 10 seconds? Is it the rising monthly number you have not calculated in one place? Is it the subtle fear of earning less, even though you once promised yourself you would never live like that again? In a moment, I am going to show you the pattern beneath all of this, the one that makes intelligent people rebuild pressure after escaping it. But first, there is one more thing Marcus discovered, and it changed the way he looked at every dollar from that point forward. The issue was not that he was spending recklessly. The issue was that his life was becoming expensive to pause. And when a life becomes expensive to pause, it becomes dangerously easy to obey. That is where maintenance turns into dependency. And once you see that clearly, the next layer becomes impossible to ignore. This is the part where the real contradiction shows itself. Most people assume the hard work ends when the pressure drops, when the savings account grows, when the paycheck stops feeling like oxygen. But that is not where it ends. That is where the hidden layer begins. The external trap is made of numbers, bills, obligations, commitments with due dates. The internal trap is made of meaning, identity, status, relief, routine. And that second trap is harder to see because it does not arrive as pain. It arrives as logic. Meet Claire. She had cut her fixed costs, built a 6-month reserve, started investing automatically. She was no longer terrified of losing income. And because of that, she believed she was finally free. But then something strange started happening. Nothing collapsed. Life looked more stable than ever. That was the contradiction. She had more control, but she felt a new kind of discomfort. Not financial pressure, psychological drift. Her mornings were quieter. Her schedule had real space. Her money was organized and growing. And yet, a familiar thought kept returning. Is this enough? Am I falling behind? Shouldn't I be producing more by now? Stop there. Those questions sound responsible. They even sound mature. But they are not neutral. They are signals. Because when a person leaves the rat race, they do not just leave pressure behind. They also lose the emotional machinery that told them who they were. Deadlines did that. Promotions did that. Performance reviews did that. Even stress did that. Stress gave structure. Structure gave certainty. Certainty gave identity. So when that old machinery disappears, the brain does something fascinating. It starts trying to replace it. Not because you are weak, not because you secretly want suffering, but because the brain prefers familiar tension over unfamiliar freedom. That is the discovery most people never name. They think they miss the income. Often, they miss the emotional architecture built around the income. The feeling of momentum, the social proof, the visible signs of advancement. And once you understand that, a lot of strange behavior starts making sense. You say you value flexibility, but you feel uneasy when your life looks too simple. You say you want autonomy, but you keep searching for external permission. You say you escaped the trap, but part of you still measures success using the exact ruler that built the trap in the first place. Write this down. Freedom without a new identity is unstable. Because if your inner standards still worship appearance, expansion, and constant proof of progress, then sooner or later, your financial decisions will start serving those standards again. And here is where the contradiction deepens. Imagine two people with identical net worth. One has low fixed costs, modest needs, steady investing habits, and room to adjust. The other has a more impressive lifestyle, higher recurring costs, and a stronger need to keep producing publicly. On paper, they look similar. Psychologically, they are worlds apart. One has wealth, the other has maintenance. One owns time, the other rents status. This is where a strong theory starts to form. The salary trap is not only a financial structure, it is a reward structure. It teaches the brain to associate visible expansion with safety. Higher income feels like progress. Higher spending feels like proof. Higher status feels like protection. And once that loop is installed, the person stops evaluating decisions by freedom gained. They evaluate them by discomfort avoided. That changes everything. A person building freedom asks, "Does this increase my room to move?" A person still running the old program asks, "Will I feel behind if I say no?" That is not a spreadsheet problem. That is a perception problem. And perception quietly directs cash flow. It tells you what kind of apartment feels appropriate, what kind of car feels reasonable, what level of convenience feels deserved. Not because those things are evil, because they become symbolic. And symbolic expenses are dangerous because people protect symbols long after they stop serving any function. This is why small upgrades become structural. This is why recurring costs grow teeth. This is why people with good income, good intentions, and even solid financial education can still rebuild dependence without noticing. Now take your calculator one more time. Write down one number. Your current monthly cost of keeping your life emotionally comfortable. Not just fed, not just housed. Comfortable enough that uncertainty does not feel threatening. That number is often more revealing than your income, because it tells you how expensive your peace has become. And if that number keeps rising every time you feel uncertain, then what you are building is not freedom. It is a padded version of the old cage. Claire discovered this when she noticed her decisions were no longer about utility. They were about reassurance. She was not buying better tools because she needed them. She was buying evidence that she was still moving upward. She was not expanding her lifestyle because life required it. She was expanding it because simplicity had started feeling emotionally ambiguous. That was the turning point. She finally saw that the system outside her had become a voice inside her. No manager was pressuring her. No company was demanding performance reviews. No creditor was forcing a new standard. And still, part of her was trying to recreate pressure just to feel normal again. That is the real danger. When captivity becomes familiar, freedom can feel unfinished. And if you do not understand that early, you will interpret your discomfort as a signal to expand again. Earn more, add more, commit more, prove more. But what if that discomfort is not a sign that you need to climb higher? What if it is simply the withdrawal from no longer being controlled? That question changes the entire story. Because now the issue is not, how do I avoid bad financial decisions? It becomes, can I tolerate a life that looks less impressive but gives me more actual power? Most people think that answer is obvious. It is not. Because the next stage is where the mind starts negotiating with the trap. And the argument it uses sounds almost intelligent. Just a little more. Just one upgrade. Just enough to feel secure. In the next chapter, you are going to see why that voice becomes loudest right before freedom starts shrinking again. And once you recognize it clearly, you may find it has already been speaking inside your own life. The revelation did not arrive through disaster. It arrived through a quiet morning when Claire finally added up everything her freedom had started demanding from her. Nothing had collapsed on the surface. Her investments were intact. Her income was diversified. Her daily life still looked calmer than most people around her. Repeated decisions can defend that space from expanding standards and returning pressure. That is why some people leave the rat race physically, while still carrying its measurement system in their nervous system every single day. They no longer report to a boss, but they still report to comparison, to visible proof of progress, to proving that stepping away was the right call. And when that pressure stays alive, new expenses stop being conveniences. They become emotional armor against ambiguity. This explains the strange contradiction so many people experience. Someone can look more stable than ever while becoming internally less capable of tolerating any instability at all. On the surface, Claire had options, but beneath the surface, she was slowly arranging her world so those options felt harder and harder to actually use. That is the revelation most people miss. Dependence often returns before crisis, during the season when everything still looks respectable. The earlier pattern hinted at this repeatedly. Commitments pile up, flexibility shrinks. Growth becomes maintenance as the baseline quietly rises. And the conclusion became unavoidable. The issue was never just income. It was always the density of obligations attached to identity. A rich schedule can trap you. A prestigious role can trap you. A polished lifestyle can trap you, without any visible distress from the outside. That is why the concrete event mattered so much. One paused contract revealed more about her real financial structure than 12 months of smooth performance ever could. It exposed how quickly the mind wanted to trade autonomy for reassurance, even when the financial data did not justify panic. And once she saw that reflex clearly, she stopped asking how to earn more. She started asking what must stay small for freedom to survive. That question is less exciting than most financial advice, less glamorous than portfolio optimization, and far more powerful, because it shifts attention from expansion toward the preservation of optionality. She reduced several recurring costs, delayed 2 planned upgrades. We defined convenience as something that had to earn its place in her monthly structure. More importantly, she changed the meaning of restraint. It was no longer deprivation. It was active protection of future movement. That is a very different conclusion from standard financial advice, which usually tells people to optimize returns before protecting flexibility first. But flexibility is what keeps a temporary setback from becoming obedience. Without it, wealth can still produce dependency beneath a beautiful surface. So what really happened was not failure, it was exposure. The hidden architecture of relapse became visible before she could deny it. And once that happened, her conclusions became concrete. Freedom must be maintained deliberately. Simplicity must be defended. Identity must be retrained over time. Otherwise, the system returns wearing better clothes, better language, better reasons, while rebuilding the same dependence underneath, your carefully improved life. And that leads to the next problem. Because seeing the pattern is important, but seeing it does not stop it when temptation starts sounding reasonable again. The real test begins after awareness, when you must create rules strong enough to protect your freedom from your own rationalizations. That is where the story now turns practical, Because the next step is not understanding the trap. It is building defenses strong enough to hold. Claire sat with the spreadsheet again. But this time, she was not looking for reassurance. She was looking for a rule strong enough to protect her from herself. Because the final danger was now completely clear. The trap did not need crisis to return. It only needed one emotional decision, repeated often enough to become a lifestyle. So here is the climax of this entire series. Escaping the rat race is not the finish line. Staying out is. And staying out depends on building a personal system that keeps freedom larger than comfort, clarity stronger than impulse, and optionality more valuable than image. That system has 5 parts. None of them are glamorous, but together they create something rare. A life that can absorb pressure without selling its future back to the old pattern. Reassurance. Most bad long-term decisions survive only because they are made too quickly. Step 5. Protect optionality like an asset, because it is one. Build a reserve designed not for optimization, but for maneuver. 3 months of essential costs is the first threshold. 6 months changes your posture in every negotiation. 12 months changes your willingness to take real risks. When you know you can absorb a slowdown, a bad client, a job loss, or a market dip, your decisions stop sounding desperate. And a person who is not desperate becomes much harder for the system to control. But there is one more layer, and it is the most overlooked of all. You must rebuild the meaning of success. If success still means visible growth, higher spending, and constant proof of advancement, then your numbers will eventually obey that belief. So replace that metric with better ones. Measure how many months of freedom you own. Measure how low your stress stays when income fluctuates. Measure how often you can say no without fear. Measure how much of your week still belongs entirely to you. Now make this practical. Take 1 page and divide it into 4 lines. Freedom floor, chosen costs, no return gap, optionality reserve. Fill in 1 real number under each. Tonight. Then circle 1 recurring expense you can remove, 1 upgrade you can delay, 1 transfer you can automate this week. Do not wait for perfect confidence. The old pattern feeds on delay. This is the moment Claire understood what financial freedom really demands. Not brilliance, not endless discipline. Repetition. Quiet, boring, deliberate repetition. The kind that feels small when you do it, and life-changing when you finally look back. She did not need a heroic move. She needed rules that worked on ordinary Tuesdays. When she was tired, uncertain, and tempted to reward herself with a new obligation. So do not only ask how to make more. Ask what must stay light. Do not only ask how to invest better. Ask what keeps you flexible enough to survive a wrong call. Do not only ask whether something is affordable. Ask whether it enlarges your future or quietly mortgages it. That is the real climax. Freedom survives when your structure can absorb reality without begging the old system to rescue you. Now, one final thing before the closing. Look at your last 3 financial decisions. Ask which one bought convenience, which one bought image, which one bought real freedom. Most people discover that the most expensive choice was not the one with the highest price tag. It was the one that quietly increased dependence. And once that becomes visible, the deeper challenge appears. Knowing what to cut is easier than living with what remains. Because the real battle is not math. It is the ability to tolerate a life that feels slower, simpler, and less publicly impressive, while becoming privately stronger. That is where nearly everyone hesitates, and it is exactly where this story now closes. Because the last step is not escaping pressure once, it is learning how to live so deliberately that the old pressure no longer feels like home when it comes back softly. So now you can see the full pattern clearly. The problem was never just low income, bad luck, or a lack of effort. The real danger was building a life that looked successful on the outside while becoming harder and harder to pause on the inside. That was the central issue from the beginning, not simply making money, but quietly becoming dependent on the exact structure that money was forced to maintain. And once that structure feels normal, most people stop questioning it until freedom starts shrinking again. What you learned here is simple, but not easy. Financial freedom is not protected by income alone. It is protected by low dependence, clear decisions, controlled commitments, and the ability to tolerate a life that may look less impressive, but gives you far more room to move. So here is the path in plain language. Know your real monthly floor. Reduce what became heavy without needing to be. Protect the gap between what you earn and what you keep. Build reserves that buy time, not just returns. And before every new commitment, ask the question most people avoid. Does this expand my life or reduce my flexibility? There are mistakes you must watch closely. The first is waiting for the perfect moment to become intentional. The second is letting every income improvement turn into a permanent lifestyle upgrade. The third is confusing visible comfort with actual security. And the most dangerous of all is believing that because you escaped once, you are no longer vulnerable to the pattern. Because you are. Everyone is. The system does not stop offering better-looking cages just because you noticed the first one. That is why this ending does not close everything. It should not. Because the deeper challenge is still ahead. How do you keep choosing freedom when the world keeps rewarding dependence with comfort, praise, and convenience? That question stays open on purpose, not to create drama, but because this is where real life begins. Not in theory, not in motivation, not in a perfect plan, but in the next ordinary decision you make after this video ends. So before you leave, do one thing. Write down the one recurring cost, one habit, or one identity signal that most threatens your freedom right now. And if something in what you just watched sounded familiar, if you recognized yourself at any point, that wasn't a coincidence. This is the Financial Freedom Saga, a 3-video series designed as a complete journey, from recognition to awakening to actual achievement. This was the 3rd video, where you saw the destination, what it's like to live with true financial freedom, and, more importantly, how not to get sucked back into a place you don't want to be. But here's the thing. Most people never get here because they don't even realize they're trapped. In the first video, you'll understand how the system was designed to keep you working forever. The rat race that traps millions of people without them even suspecting it. In the second video, you'll see real stories of people who found their way out of the wage trap and the exact path they took to escape this matrix. 3 videos, 3 pillars. Recognize, escape, achieve. You've already seen what's possible to achieve. Now you'll understand why so few get there and how you can be different. The videos are already on the channel. Which one will you watch first? Click here and choose the next video. See you there.